Appreciate if you can elaborate further on viewing the happenings of the world in the right way by informing those that are going through the calamities that they are viewing it wrongly. They may be offended. Then how then can we explain it to them in a gentle way?
Gentle way, yeah. Well, I think to me, this is one of the, there's a lot of hope in this idea of thinking about the future as being made through your character, through being kind, through being caring, through having a good heart. Because it brings hope to humanity when you know that your future is determined by your inner qualities rather than what happens outside. It actually takes away so much of the burden that we have to deal with. You can start to see that, yes, war is problematic. Yeah, war is really has many bad consequences, and of course people are suffering a lot in all of this. But actually, in the long run, what really matters for each one of us is how we live. And one of the things that I found so fascinating as well, I only told really half of the story of the person who was very distraught by the war, but there was another story as well. And the other story was another lady, I think it was. And this other lady, she was also interviewed about, her response to the war. And she said that it was surprising. She said it was amazing. This is actually right now in Ukraine. It's amazing because she said actually she felt more happy, more spiritually uplifted than she had done in a long time. Because she said that because of the war, people came together. People had more compassion. People had more understanding for each other. And actually so many good qualities in people came out. And they were more happy than they were before the war. And this is one of those kind of extraordinary things about life sometimes, that happiness occurs in very strange situations. And what this reminds you is that it reminds you that, well, when the world outside is collapsing, when the material world no longer can give you the happiness that it ordinarily does, and you look inside instead, you can see that those spiritual qualities actually make you more happy than the external world. The external world is not so important. You are more happy now when there's a war than you were before the war because you're building up the spiritual qualities. It means that the spiritual qualities are far more happy, far more important for your happiness than the external world. Yeah, it shows you the truth about this idea that how we live, our hearts being in the right place, that is actually what matters the most for this, for our happiness and for the meaning of life and all of these kind of things. It's a very powerful insight. And what that means, of course, is that in the long run, if you keep on building up these qualities, and remember, these qualities are not something you just experience them, you just do them once. These are qualities that you build up and you accumulate over time, and you create this kind of feeling of more lightness, more happiness, more brightness within. This war is just a reminder of the importance of this. And then you carry on and then you build a good future for yourself. It is to me, a very optimistic view of the world, because it means that when there is a pandemic, when all of these things are happening around us, which seems so troublesome, when there is climate change, what is going to happen with the climate of the world? It is not looking very good. But remember that regardless of what happens, you will be fine if you develop your spiritual life. This is the message here, because this is what happens in the long run. Of course, there is a problem here. One of the problems here is that from a Buddhist point of view, we're also coming from the idea of rebirth, because when we talk about what gives rise to happiness in the long run, a very important aspect of that is the idea of, well, in your future life, certainly very much depends on your karma, or depends on your actions and the kindness you do in this life. I mean, it's important in this life, but even more important in the future life. So here, the idea of right view as a rebirth is also an important part. And of course, there are many people in the world who don't believe in rebirth, so they miss out on that aspect of you know, of building up a future through kindness and happiness. So this shows you the importance of rebirth also, and how this also influences this whole idea of right view in this particular case. So I think this is a very hopeful message, a very optimistic message. Basically, we need to give up more on the world. It may sound a terrible thing to say, but actually it is really the only reasonable outcome when you see how unreliable it is. Give up more on the world, focus more on spiritual qualities. And spiritual qualities just means kindness. Even secular people understand what spiritual qualities really are about. Yeah. So focus on those things. Then you are creating an island for yourself, like the Buddha says. Be an island unto yourself. This is what it means. Yeah. You have this inner ability to stand apart from the world and to be an island in the midst of turmoil when everything in the world is going wrong. Yeah. Something like that is what I would say. And even if people are not a Buddhist, I think they can appreciate that, at least to some extent. Anything else, Bobby?
Sister Susie, would you like to ask your question to Ajahn?
Yes, please. Thank you, Ajahn, for the explanation. I'd like to inquire, or I'd like to know a little bit more on right view when it comes to, in the sutta itself, when you're saying that you regard form as self, self as having form in self or self in form. What is the right view when one is meditating? My question is like, when I'm experiencing or when I'm observing my meditation practice, so do I actually, you know, it's like at times it's like if form is not self, then who is meditating? So is it the formation, the body formation, which is experiencing? And then is it the consciousness that is experiencing meditation? So may I have may I ask Ajahn advice? Because sometimes inside is that, what is happening inside? That is my question. Thank you, Ajahn.
Okay. Yeah, I will come more to talk more about this afterwards, because it's coming more, we get more into these things further on in the sutta, this idea of, you know, the five khandhas and the sense of self in relation to that. But it's important not to make it too theoretical. Yeah, when you ask question, well, what is actually experienced in meditation? I would say, don't worry too much about those things. They're kind of, you know, these are some of these things that come further down, are actually quite profound. This have to do with, you know, insight into the five khandhas and all of that. And I would say it doesn't really matter so much what is experiencing it. What you will notice in your meditation is that as you become more calm and more peaceful, then it's as if certain things have stopped. Yeah, certain things have disappeared. It's like you have narrowed down your idea of a self. Who you are is now more narrow. Very often we identify with our thinking. I am the thinker. Yeah, I think about these things. But then you become peaceful and you don't think anymore. So you know that you are not the thinking, because now you are still there, but the thinking is gone. Yeah. So you know that the thinking is not you. And this is the best way of thinking about non-self, is the idea that you see things in your meditation disappearing. The thinking is gone. Wow, actually, it's great when the thinking is gone. It's so peaceful. Yeah, and I know it cannot be me because I'm still here when the thinking is gone. And then you start to understand that actually this idea of non-self is very beautiful, because things disappearing, things that you thought were you, actually they're not you. And when they go, you are more happy. This is the right way of thinking about non-self. Don't worry so much about what it is that is doing the meditation. Just notice that when things disappear, it is better. Yeah, and these things are actually gone. And then I think you are dealing with the idea of non-self in a way that is very conducive to deeper meditation in the future. If you try too hard to understand exactly what is going on, if you try to use the idea of non-self saying, oh, there's no one here, there's no one here. Sometimes if you're not ready for it, it can lead to confusion. It can lead to a sense of even imbalance, even distress in the meditation, because very often we're not ready for those questions. These questions are often very, very profound. These are the things that maybe lead you to stream entry down the track. So use it in a way that is conducive. Always ask yourself, what is it that really makes me more peaceful? And that is where you should go. Don't ask yourself questions that do not lead to peace. Only use those things that actually lead to peace in your meditation, and then you will be on the right track. But anyway, I will come back to those things, Susie, later on when we come a bit further down in this discourse, because these are certainly, I think, important questions. So let's carry on. If there are any more questions, Bobby, we can take those later on.
Yeah, Ajahn, there's a few questions, 5 questions, but I think we maybe take 2 only.
Yeah.
Okay. If one's default setting is to react to what is happening around us, very much like Newton's law of physics, to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. How does one overcome that?
Okay, so remember that the default is not permanent. The default can be changed. Yeah. So maybe that is your default now, but that default is not set in concrete or in stone. It is always flexible. And so this is just this is what I mean by right view. The reason why you have a certain default, a certain way of reacting, is basically because of wrong view. You're looking at the world in the wrong way. You're looking at the world in a way which leads to negativity or anger or upset or whatever, but that view can be changed. And this is the whole idea with talking the way I have been doing now, is to help you to change that view, to look at things in a different way. Yeah? And as you do that, your default will change. And suddenly you start to look at the world with compassion. Suddenly you start to look at the world with a sense of care. Suddenly you start to look at the world with a sense of renouncing it, yeah, giving it up, understanding that there is no solution, there is no final solution in that world. If you want a real solution to the problems of life, there's only one place to look, and that is within. That is where the solution is found. And sometimes you will have seen that solution in your own life. Sometimes when you meditate, you become peaceful. It is precisely because you let go of the world that you become peaceful. And that's where you find real liberation. That's where you find a real place of refuge. The refuge happens inside. Yeah, the world can never be a refuge because the world is out of control. And then you start to get a new default, because you start to understand where the refuge actually is found, where that sense of peace is found. And if you make this a very powerful refuge in this life, then you will carry on in the future life in exactly the same way. That means that you will have a very, wherever you go in the future, it's going to be very positive for you. So not only do you have a refuge for this life, but you have a long-term refuge somewhere that is incredibly going to be very, very helpful for you.
Next question, Ajahn. I would like to ask, you said that the external world actually only affects us a little, but the Buddha has been giving us advice about having good environment, for example, wise friends.
Yes. So when I say the external world, what I mean is the 5 sense world. Yeah, I mean all the things that we attach to in that world outside. But of course, there is the spiritual side of that world, and the spiritual side of that world is positive. Yeah. So of course, when it comes to wise friends, the Kalyana Mittas, then of course, it is good to maybe even attach a little bit, attach a little bit to the Buddha. The Buddha is the number 1 Kalyana Mitta, so it's okay to be a bit attached to the Buddha, or attached to your, whoever are your spiritual friends in this life, the people you take as your teachers or as your people who support you. It's okay to have a little bit of attachment in that area. But that is like a spiritual area. That is not really what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is the things in the world that are the pleasures of the five senses. Kalyanamitta is the pleasure of the spiritual company. It is not the pleasure of the senses. Yeah, the pleasure of the senses, whereby we expect the world to go in a certain way, where we expect not to have suffering in that world. That is what I really am referring to. So make a clear distinction between spiritual aspects and the worldly aspects of things.
Thank you, Ajahn. I think one more question.
We can take a few more if you like. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Everyone is preoccupied with the past and future. Do you think this is human nature, or we pick up thinking habit after birth?
Past and the future, it is a little bit of human nature, because this is what most people do, think about the past and the future. But it is not a nature which is absolute. We have to be, when we use the word nature, we have to understand that nature itself is changeable. It is not something which is kind of a fixed reality. If you use the word nature as a fixed reality, well, then it is not the case. But it is, if you use the word nature as a tendency of human beings, well, then it is true, yeah, because we are reborn in this world precisely because we are attached to the world. That's why we're reborn here. And that's because we are attached to the world. That's why we think about the past and the future. This is what it is all about. But because that nature is not fixed, it can be changed. Yeah, so doesn't have to be that way. So that is, I think, the right way to think about that.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, may I know what to do when during sitting meditation insect come and crawling?
Yes, this is a hard one. So what you have to do, there's two things, there's different things you can do. One is to ignore the insect, and you can say, welcome insect. My heart is open to you. I love insects. So you can do that. If you don't have a problem with the insect, you will be okay. But if that is too difficult, then just open your eyes and just push the insect away a little bit, yeah, and show it a different direction or whatever. Maybe even pick it up gently and throw it outside if you have to. But the best way sometimes is, I prefer, if there's insect, I prefer to endure a little bit, yeah, because very often it's very small kind of endurance, depending on what kind of insect. If it is some dangerous insect, like a scorpion or a centipede, then be careful. But if it's just an ant or a cockroach or something, a mosquito or something like that, then very often just ignoring it is the best way to go. But don't lash out, yeah. Don't get angry, because that or don't do anything silly, because that will destroy not just the animal, it will also destroy your meditation. Yeah, this is exactly what you should never do. So always try to have compassion for that little creature which comes to you in your meditation practice.
Thank you, Ajahn. Last question. Instead of burning photo albums, maybe we can use it in a positive way. For example, helping us remember, understand birth, aging, sickness, and death. Or maybe Ajahn have better ideas.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can do that. But make sure, if you do that, you can look at yourself now, and you can look at what you looked like 30 years ago. And I'm always shocked when I look at myself in the mirror and I see what I looked like 30 years ago. I think, jeepers, what an incredible change over 30, 40 years. But so that is a good way. I agree with you. So if you can do that, it's excellent. But sometimes it leads to a sense of sadness, yeah, to what you have lost. If it leads to sadness of what you have lost, then don't use it, because then it will be a bad thing. But if it leads to insight, like you're doing now, excellent. I think that's a very good idea. One of the things I think we should do is that when we take pictures of ourselves, we should look really sad and miserable. Yeah, we should look like, oh, dukkha, this is so terrible. Nobody smile, yeah, on the pictures. So next time I come to the BGF Bobby, say, no one smile, everyone look miserable. Then you take a picture, you put it in the wall, and then some years later on, you can say, oh, look, in those days, we were so miserable. Now we are much better, yeah? So yeah, then you get the feeling that you're kind of moving in the right direction. You're creating more happiness in your life. So that is one way, just having pictures that are more realistic. Yeah, sometimes you look at some of the great photographers of the world, the people who make photography for the big newspapers and things, and very often they take pictures of terrible things. Yeah, this is what photographers often do, who are professional, who are in the news industry. They take pictures of reality. Yeah? They take pictures of all the garbage, the waste dumps in the world. They take pictures of problems, of children starving, things we don't really want to see here. But this is what real photographers do, because they want to show us reality here. So maybe we should be more like the real photographers, the professional ones, and show reality as it actually is. So go outside of the BGF building and find all the garbage in the street, take pictures of the garbage. This is what the BGF environment is like, or something like that. And so it's really whatever you do that makes you more realistic about life. Yeah, that is really the point. But you have a very good point in what you're saying. Use it to contemplate old age and these kind of things. And then I think you are definitely on the right track. So it's a very good point. So thank you for saying that.
Okay. Thank you, Ajahn.